Well, thank you all for coming. On November 25th, 2022, then 14-year-old Samantha Humphrey left her home on Parkwood Boulevard in the city of Schenectady and went to meet a 14-year-old boy who was her on-again, off-again boyfriend. She never came back home. Samantha's coat was found at the edge of the Mohawk River underneath the railroad bridge by Riverside Park in the Stockade neighborhood of Schenectady. On February 22nd, 2023, a fisherman in that same location spotted her body now floating close to the shore. Today, I can report to the community that the investigation into Samantha's death has culminated in a sealed indictment, charging that now 17-year-old she met with on the night of her death with one count of murder in the second degree for intentionally causing her death. Because the defendant was 14 at the time of the crime, he's being charged as a juvenile offender, and I cannot release his name or a copy of the indictment. Of course, whenever we do this, I have to remind you that an indictment is just a formal accusation. This defendant is presumed to be innocent unless and until his guilt is proven beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. Although I cannot talk about the evidence in this case, I can comment on the motive. We believe that Samantha thought she was pregnant and that this sometime boyfriend was the father. He wanted nothing to do with her baby and insisted that she get rid of the baby. Samantha told him that she wanted to keep the baby. That night, they walked together to the area of the railroad bridge. They argued with each other. The argument turned physical, and he caused her death by strangulation and asphyxiation. He then disposed of her body in the river. Autopsy revealed no evidence of whether she was pregnant. Another question which I am sure you will ask is, why did this investigation take almost 2.5 years? Although this defendant was a suspect from the beginning, this investigation needed to answer several questions before we could bring charges. And in this any kind of case, you have to understand that double jeopardy applies. And if we go too early with a case before we have all of the evidence, that might jeopardize our success. Most of those questions involve particular evidence or issues which I cannot detail. But I can tell you that this was a very complicated investigation that involved video evidence from public and private sources, reams of phone and GPS extractions requiring detailed analysis, serology and DNA testing, court-ordered eavesdropping warrants in December of 2022, and then again in February of 2023 that produced hours of recordings, and expert consultation in the areas of hydrology and forensic pathology. I will tell you about one particular cause for delay. 5 months into the investigation, detectives became aware of the existence of an iPad that could contain useful evidence. But this iPad was an older model, no longer manufactured, that was both broken and protected by an unknown password. We purchased a used iPad of the same model and gave it to the New York State Police Computer Crime Unit. They rebuilt the old iPad and then used software to force entry. This procedure took more than a year to complete, but was ultimately successful. Another issue was the enormous amount of social media generated around this case. That was a giant distraction and caused law enforcement resources to be allocated to chasing down rabbit holes to disprove theories based on rumor and gossip. Almost none of that was of any use, but took time away from more important work. I'm not saying that there was no help from the public. Useful leads were generated by members of the public who contacted the police, but this social media onslaught I refer to is something altogether different. But work on this case occurred steadily since Samantha disappeared. In the spring of 2024, investigators and prosecutors began meeting weekly to collectively discuss future steps. I thank SPD Assistant Chief Patrick LaGuire for organizing these meetings. Where are you, Pat? In the back. Thank you, sir. Keeping the investigation focused and continuing to commit resources to follow those leads. The members of the Schenectady Police Youth Aid Bureau under the leadership of Sergeant Adriel Linier all worked on this case. Lead Detective Chris Wilgocki performed extremely important work in this case and was an enormous resource to our office. Chris, thank you, sir. At all times in this investigation, we called upon various elements of the New York State Police for specialized assistance. Those include major crimes led by Senior Investigator Jason DeLuca. Jason is with us? Yes, sir. The Special Investigations Unit, who is represented here by Lieutenant Eric Harris. Thank you, Eric. The Underwater Recovery Team, led by Sergeant Dave Fisher. Dave and his crew, there you are, dove into that river during November, well, actually December. Well, yeah, November, late November and December, 16 times they were either in or on that river. The Aviation Unit, the Forensic Investigation Center, the Forensic Video Multimedia Service. Jim Kennedy and Jason Cooper did outstanding work for us. The Computer Forensic Laboratory with Senior Investigator Kevin Lieback, particularly. Kevin, are you here? Thank you, sir. And the New York State Intelligence Center. We can't thank them enough State Police is represented by Captain Johnny Bove, the Zone Commander in Fonda. Thank you, sir, for everything that the State Police did in this case. We wouldn't be here without your services. Thank you. Finally, what this case required to move forward was a commitment of full-time resources from my office. That came in the person of Deputy Chief Assistant District Attorney CHRISTINA Pelham, who is the chief of our homicide bureau with almost 20 years experience as a prosecutor handling many murder cases. Working with ADA Mike Nobles of her homicide unit and myself, CHRISTINA was able to clear her docket and work full-time on this investigation beginning in January. With the help of our investigators, John Madden and Marianne McGovern, we interviewed all of the witnesses that had been identified. Once I was satisfied that all outstanding questions had been answered and that we had secured all of the potential evidence, I asked the Office of Court Administration to impanel a special grand jury to hear the case. I asked for that because I knew this presentation would require multiple sessions, and I knew that putting it before one of our sitting grand juries would ask them for an unreasonable amount of work and jeopardize their ability to handle their regular caseload based on ongoing business and arrests. In response to that request, on April 4th, 2025, Judge Elizabeth Gary, presiding judge of the Appellate Division, 3rd Department, signed an order authorizing the impanelment of that additional grand jury. We told this grand jury that in order to vote on this matter, they must be here for every session and hear substantially all of the evidence in the case, which is the legal rule. They all committed to that schedule, and to their enormous credit as citizens of this community, all 23 jurors heard all of the evidence we presented. They heard from 46 witnesses in 7 sessions of testimony over a 3-week period, including receiving 45 exhibits and evidence, although that number grossly underestimates the actual number of exhibits because many of those exhibits are multimedia in nature and contain subfiles of images, videos, and recordings, some of which were in the hundreds. They did return a sealed indictment, which was handed up yesterday to Judge Mark Blanchfield, who is the designated youth part judge for Schenectady County. He issued a warrant of arrest for this juvenile offender. He was taken into custody today by the Schenectady Police and members of the New York State Police Special Investigation Unit. I'll turn it over to CHRISTINA now to detail for you what happened at the arraignment and for a couple of comments. CHRISTINA.
So late this morning, we had a court appearance in front of Judge Blanchfield where he unsealed an indictment charging the defendant with 1 count of murder in the 2nd degree. The defendant was arraigned on that indictment. He pled not guilty at this time, and he was remanded to a juvenile detention facility where he is now. The indictment that was unsealed this morning is the result of the hard work and determination of so many people in so many agencies. I wanted to personally thank the Schenectady Police Department and the New York State Police, not only for their work on this investigation, but for the resources that they provided to our office, particularly over these last few months as we move toward grand jury. All we had to do was pick up the phone at any time, whether it was with a question, an issue that came up, if we needed something, and someone was available to us from those 2 agencies immediately. I want to recognize Detective Wilgocki in particular, who was basically detailed to our office over these last few months. He, along with our investigators, Madden and McGovern, worked tirelessly with myself, ADA Nobles, and DA Carney to locate every witness we needed for the grand jury and every piece of evidence we needed. And the final piece of this puzzle, before going to grand jury, was bringing in ADA Nobles, who further analyzed the phone extractions that Senior Investigator Lieback had performed on the multiple cell phones collected in this case. ADA Nobles worked in conjunction with Senior Investigator Lieback and went through the volumes of data that these phones yielded in this case, including hundreds and hundreds of text messages, phone logs, search histories, GPS data, and more. It was a massive undertaking, but the results and the evidence that it produced were really invaluable to the case. So thank you to everyone for your efforts and your dedication to this case.
Thank you, CHRISTINA. Now I'd like to bring up Chief Eric Clifford of the Schenectady Police Department for a few remarks. He was my partner in this case, as he is in every case in the law enforcement community. So, Eric.
Thank you, Bob. Before I talk about my prepared remarks, I just want to really just stress that this case never became anything more than high priority for us. I know from my conversations with Bob and CHRISTINA for the DA's office and from our colleagues at the state police and other law enforcement agencies. But for my remarks for this case, I just want to acknowledge how deeply tragic and heartbreaking this incident has been for our community, including members of our law enforcement community who worked on the case. A young life has been lost, and yet another young person now stands accused in connection with that loss. We recognize the grief, confusion, and sorrow that so many people in our community are feeling. First and foremost, on behalf of the Schenectady Police Department and all agencies involved, I extend our condolences to Samantha's family, her father, Jeff, mother, Jacqueline, and brother, Maddox, her grandparents, John and Diane Matarazzo, her extended family and friends and loved ones. No family should ever have to endure this kind of pain. As already stated earlier today, a grand jury returned an indictment against a 17-year-old male in connection with the death of Samantha. This indictment follows a thorough investigation. The Schenectady Police Department, New York State Police, and local law enforcement in coordination with the District Attorney's Office, who many times when we work difficult cases, we rely on heavily the District Attorney's Office and the State Police to help us. So I'd like to thank both for that. We know this case has generated significant attention, particularly among young people in our community. We ask that the public and the media be respectful and responsible in your coverage and conversations, especially on social media. These are young people. Both families are suffering right now. Please be mindful of the impact words can have on them. Finally, for those in need of support, the police department will work in partnership with the school district, the Schenectady School District, and local leaders to help facilitate access to support services and resources for students, families, and community members who may be impacted. If you or somebody you know is struggling, please reach out. No one should go through this alone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. Stephanie O'Neill from the State Police has copies of my prepared remarks, as well as a list of attendees here to pass out for you if you want it. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Do you believe there might have been anybody else involved in this murder, either the night of or after the fact, perhaps helping to conceal evidence or help this defendant?
We have no evidence of that at this time at all.
Mr. Kamarie, do you plan to ask the court, ask the judge to treat this young man as an adolescent offender?
He's actually a juvenile offender under the law, not an adolescent offender, even though by age he would be now. At the time it was committed, he was 14, so that makes him a juvenile offender.
So you have no recourse.
No, we have charged him as an adult. That's an adult proceeding as a juvenile offender. And it will stay in adult court unless and until a motion is made to move to family court, which a judge grants. And I don't think that will happen in this case.
Based on the evidence that you guys received, text messages, any reasonable thoughts that may have been premeditated murder?
Well, as you know, premeditation is not an element of our law at all. You know, when I discussed motive, I did discuss the fact that he had a particular motive that we know about in terms of not wanting her not to be pregnant anymore, if indeed she was pregnant. But there also was a physical altercation, and that was a part of it too. So I think it's complicated and interwoven. But premeditation is not something that we need to prove or have to prove. And you know, but you know, as I've described it, I think there are multiple issues at play.
The iPad that you mentioned, was that owned by Samantha or the suspect?
That was actually Samantha's old iPad.
Well, you said if she was pregnant, is there a reason to believe that she may?
Well, there's no proof that she was. If she was, it would have been very early. And she, you know, she's a 14-year-old girl. I mean, she might not have known, you know, much about that.
In your past experiences as a prosecutor, you prosecuted cases involving a 14-year-old accused of murdering another 14-year-old. Can you characterize that?
Well, I think we have prosecuted a juvenile offender, but it was for killing somebody who was an adult. It was a long time ago. I don't think we've ever had a juvenile killing a juvenile.
On the night that Samantha met up with his off-again boyfriend, is there any evidence to suggest that there were other individuals, or is it just the two of them there?
As I said, there's no evidence of anybody else's presence there that night.
At the time of the autopsy, I recall medical examiner could not come up with the cause of death, and yet today you say the cause of death was strangulation. How did you come to that conclusion?
That's a good question. So we met several times with Dr. Sikorick, the forensic pathologist who performed this autopsy exam. And he was given information at the time. But since that time of the autopsy, there has been a lot of other information that the investigation has revealed. We met with Dr. Sikorick, and he wanted to view the scene. So we took him down there, and we showed him the scene where this happened, the bridge, the trails. He was shown evidence in the case and told where the evidence was found, and he could see it himself. He also examined Samantha's medical records, psychiatric records, and was given statements that were obtained or on in the investigation. The only reason he ruled at the time that it was undetermined cause of death was for the slim possibility that it could have been a suicide. But he wrote in his notes at the time that it was a probable homicide. After doing that further investigation, he was satisfied that suicide was not an option in this case. So he's now ruled the manner of death a homicide caused by asphyxiation and strangulation.
And are you convinced that the suspect pushed her into the river? There's no chance that she slipped and fell.
No chance.
The indictment was unsealed for the arraignment. Just to clarify,
And when might that be available? And is that
It is not available because we cannot release his name. But it is a one-count indictment charging intentional murder.
Did the suspect have any prior records?
That's not something I can comment on. But he was 14 at the time. So
Can you talk about what other distinctions there are between a juvenile offender and an adult offender?
Well,
Because you can't release the
right.
indictment and you can't release his name. Is
Right.
that where it is?
Well, I mean, eventually it could be a trial, and if there's a trial, it would be a public trial. I mean, that's up to the defendant. But the only other distinction is that as a juvenile offender, the maximum sentence he faces is 15 to life.
Can you comment
As
on
opposed
the,
to 25 to life.
Correct.
can you comment on the circumstances of the suspect's arrest, where he was when he was doing it?
I believe he was arrested by officers from Schenectady and the State Investigations, the unit of state police, when he had left his house and was on his way to school,
As far as you know, he's been attending school for the last 2.5 years.
as far as I know.
You know when he was first questioned was back in 2022.
Well, I think that the investigators had multiple contacts with him during the period of the investigation.
You talked about a tremendous distraction of social media. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, there were people, there were blog sites, there was stuff. There was, at one point, one individual had accused over time 8 different people of committing this murder, and none of that has any legitimacy.
At one point, I think the reward was up to around $20,000. Do you know if that will be handed out there?
Oh, I don't know anything about that reward. Nobody's asked me to do anything with that.
So 46 witnesses came before the grand jury. Is that unusual amount for a case like this? 46
That is a major commitment of time and effort and resources, and asking witnesses to come in or subpoenaing them to come in. That is true. We treated this like a trial, and I think it's the kind of case we had to do that because it was like a jigsaw puzzle, and we had to put all the pieces together. So lots of people had knowledge, one little piece of the puzzle, but we needed to have them all in to put it all together. No, I can't. I can't. I don't. Once a warrant is issued, there's no more talking or questioning of somebody. So that would not be a factor.
If you have a public defender, early, I don't know. Too early to talk about what he was upset.
I mean, I don't know exactly his representation going forward. I know he had an attorney there this morning.
Do we know when the suspect and Samantha knew each other before, or are we going out prior to this?
I think a couple of years. No, I can't describe the evidence.
You or investigator Blyback, forgive me if I mispronounced it. You had to recreate an iPad that is no longer made. Can you tell us
No,
about that?
we had an old iPad that was broken. In order to fix it, we had to buy an iPad off market of the same vintage in order to get parts from that one into the old one to get it to work again. And that was done. Took about a year. Okay, anything else, folks?
What's next?
What's next is discovery, which is a massive undertaking in this case. And we proceed. We probably won't speak about it again unless and until it's resolved. But I wanted to do it in one shot here today because I know how much community interest there is in this case, and rightly so.
Timetable when a trial could possibly start.
Well, I mean, we're backed up more than a year right now in homicide case. Christina, I think, had 5 pending before this one. So, it's unfortunately, it's going to take a while. We have a case going to verdict today in a double homicide. So, we are regularly dealing with the ongoing cases, and this will take its place towards the end of the line. Yeah.
Since you won't have an opportunity to speak about this again, would you characterize this as a member of the community, as a prosecutor?
Look, as a member in my job, district attorney, I think there is no greater insult to the community than somebody who is murdered. And I don't want to, characterize or compare murders because every murder involves a horrible loss to the family, to the friends of that person, but also to the structure and fabric of the community. This case has been such an insult to the community for a long time. And even though every life is precious, every life is equal, the death of a 14-year-old child who had her whole life to live in front of her is particularly difficult. Okay.
Details, yeah, I need to get the evidence directly, but is there certain thing we're looking for in that iPad, like text messages or like a picture?
I can't get into detail about the evidence. Okay.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, everybody.
Tell me what does it look like in heaven? Is it peaceful? Is it free like they say? Does the sun shine bright forever? Your tears, your pain gone away, yeah. 'Cause here on earth it feels like everything good is missing. since you left. And here on earth, everything's different. There's an emptiness. I hope you're dancing in the sky. I hope you're singing in the angels' choir. I hope the angels know what they have. I bet it's so nice up in here since you arrived. Tell me why do you up in heaven? All your days filled with love and light. Is there music? Is there art and invention? Tell me, are you happy or alive? 'Cause here on earth it feels like everything good is missing since you left. And here on earth everything's different. There's an emptiness. I hope you're dancing in the sky. I hope you're singing in the angels' choir. I hope the angels know what they have. I bet it's so nice up in here since you arrived. Since you arrived. I hope you're singing in the angels' choir.